So today's episode with Tanna brings us to a part of the world we have not spent a lot of time in. Kon-Tiki was probably the most recent time we were kind of in this part of the world, and this is the first movie in this whole project that is set in a country that I had never heard of. Had you heard of Vanuatu?
I don't think so.
Okay, it was definitely not on my radar at all. And so Tanna refers to an island actually kind of in the country or the Republic of Vanuatu, kind of off the east coast of Australia, kind of northwest of New Zealand. So we're dealing with I hate to say primitive tribe, but that is what we would recognize it as. There's definitely a lot of bare breasts and naked butts in this movie as these people is just kind of live. But what's interesting too is how they deal with. So this is set in the 80s. I think specifically 1987 is when this seems to be set. And they're basically living the same way their ancestors have for millennia. But what surprised me is how aware they are of the quote-unquote modern or Western world and the outside world.
Yeah, like they seemingly, they live this way. It's not because
it's not ignorance,
right? And I think when I first started watching this movie, I was like, oh, I wonder like how come these people haven't ever been contacted? Surely if they were contacted by like explorers or something, then they would want to adopt our Western ways because, why wouldn't you want McDonald's and Netflix? But like they totally know about the Western world. They don't even like they live so close that like these two characters walk like they're within walking distance of a church and a little colony on their island that is like wearing Western clothes and like has a Christian church there. Like they know about the Western world. I think one of them in the movie shows a picture that he went to the UK. He went to London and met Prince Charles.
Right, and Prince Philip, and then one of the characters is even named Charlie, and it's like, oh, that's an odd name. It's like, no, because they used the British name Charlie and just thought it was a fun name that they could use.
Yeah, they know about the outside world. They know, they are aware of modern culture. They just don't really care about it. They just want to keep living the way they are, which I think is like, it's really cool. But it was kind of eye-opening to me that my first instinct was, oh, well, they probably just don't know about modern culture.
Right, that's kind of what you assume, that they just haven't been contacted yet. And the couple comparisons that come to mind is one I just thought of just now is it's probably not too dissimilar to Amish communities in the United States that are obviously fully aware of modern technology and modern ways of life, and they just choose to, in varying degrees, obviously, we there's
right.
It's not, I don't know of any communities around here that fully go no electricity, but they definitely go for a simpler life. And so this is, I think, just the South Pacific version of that. They are just choosing to live this way.
It differs a little bit, though, because with, when you have like Amish communities, that's more of like a religious thing where they're choosing to live that way because of their religion. Whereas this is, it's almost like,
well, it's cultural.
Right. But it's not like, oh, we need to like make sure we keep this culture the way we have it. Like, it's like, well, we don't really care for that. Like, that's not really our thing. We're just going to keep doing this. At least that's the way that I saw it.
Right. They don't feel like it's morally superior. It is just,
right.
It's just like, this is a better way of life. So I always think about, it's the dolphin thing. I don't know if we've talked about dolphins before, but the whole idea of like dolphins are crazy intelligent. Obviously, they don't build cities or anything, but it's the whole idea of we stress out so much in the Western world about, trying to, quote unquote, keep up with the Joneses and just the stress to succeed and just, we have a lot of great things, but we're also always stressing out about it. And we just everyone wishes they were at the beach, but then they come home to the grind. Versus dolphins are insanely intelligent and just swim and play all day. So it's like they're always on vacation. So who has a better civilization, humans or dolphins?
Right.
Or I remember I've mentioned this on one episode of the podcast before. It might have been Track Nerds, but the woman who was like a writer in New York City making six figures, and basically everyone at her office would talk about like, oh, I can't wait to get away for 2 weeks and go down to the Caribbean. And like that was like the goal in life, was this 2-week window every year that you had to bust your butt and die an early death because of how much stress you're undergoing. She just said screw it and just moved down to the Caribbean island and opened like a ice cream stand. So live the vacation. Why do you have to make six figures when you can live the life you want for way less than that if you're just willing to make those changes? again, I just think that maybe just how these people are viewing life, and just a simpler way of life. They're not starving.
No.
They're living fine. They're living their life. And the only thing that confused me is I would think, obviously, people getting sick. There's they don't have the modern medicine to kind of help save some lives. And then what they don't really address in the show is how are they not just like covered in bug bites and just getting I would think they would just be riddled with that kind of thing. And I don't know enough about that specific island, but I would think you'd be worried about those kinds of things. But anyway, so that's the setting of this story that is based on an actual occurrence in the 80s about this, I guess you would call it the star-crossed lovers.
This is almost like a Romeo and Juliet, but in the South Pacific.
Yes.
I mean, it's not, and it's not even like based on Romeo and Juliet. It's just a true story that is super similar.
Right. The difference is it's not rival tribes that aren't allowed to marry. It's more kind of the opposite.
Right.
They have a tradition of arranged marriages, and these two young people fall in love, and she gets arranged to be married to someone else in a neighboring tribe to kind of shore up that alliance, and they run away together instead. I kind of misread the Wikipedia page, and I guess I'm glad I did. So even though I had heard it compared to Romeo and Juliet, spoiler alert, I still wasn't expecting the double suicide at the end, because reading on the Wikipedia page, the actors playing Wawa and Dane, their last names are Wawa and Dane. So I figured, they're playing themselves, so they must live. And I'm like, nope, that's not the case. They commit suicide together at the end.
That's just what they named the characters. And apparently, like, they shot this, like, those two actors, like, they're playing themselves, and like the tribe that they're showing are actually those tribes, and they actually live like that. The film crew just kind of was like, hey, can we tell this story? And they're like, yep, we'll help you out. We'll be all the characters.
Yes. So all exclusively non-professional actors, people actually from these tribes living in this part of the world. They basically just agreed to be filmed. So I guess I do kind of, it's similar to like when I talk about The Writer in South Dakota, it's similar kind of thing where they just tell a story in the world with non-professional actors, which in the United States seems crazy. For some reason, it seems less crazy if you're going to get these native tribes, but kind of to what we were talking about before with, they're fully aware of Western culture to the point that they're not even afraid of the, so-called corrupting influence. It's like, oh no, sure, come and hang out with us for a while and you can film us or whatever. That's cool. You're cool too. Right. We do this, you do your thing. You can film us.
Yep.
So yes, this whole movie, this star-crossed, sad, tragic love story that actually happened 20 years ago. I don't know. It's just so cool that it was the actual people. Sorry, not just the actual people, but the actual tribes. And then the big change that they made after thousands of years of culture, and they do address it in the movie, is that, hey, we do need to compromise on this and allow love marriages. And that is kind of the big change. And then to this day, they do now allow love marriages because they were just basically like, our population is dwindling so much, we can't afford to have people go join the Christians or the Western world, or people kill themselves if they can't marry who they want. We just don't have the numbers for that. So if we're going to survive, we have to compromise.
And that was another thing that I completely did not expect at the end, where it's like, I don't think they do. The tribal leaders are talking about it, about how they need to allow love marriages. And I was like, I did not expect that. I didn't expect them to, change their tribal ways, because a lot of the times when you have a quote unquote primitive tribal group like this, one of the things that is portrayed about them is how stuck in their ways they are.
Right.
And so to see a story like this where it's like, no, like it's people, like things happen, and these groups will react to things that happen, and I thought that was really cool.
The other thing that was sad to see was looking at the actors. So did you see the actor who played Dane? He died just a couple years ago, or actually just last year. He was only 24 years old. So he completely, nothing to do with the movie. He was out working somewhere and got a cut on his leg that went septic, and he died.
Oh no, I didn't see that.
So super sad. Just 24 years old. The film itself was nominated for Best Foreign Film at the Oscars. It is a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I was frankly surprised how engaging it was. And I think it helps that it's a newer movie. I mean, this film is just from 2015, I think. 2016.
Yeah.
So it's definitely kind of has a modern sentiment. It's not slow paced at all. It takes a while getting into the world before you kind of get into the actual conflict that's going to try to tear them apart. And I don't know. It was fascinating. I mean, a comp might be something like a Apocalypto, but that's set, hundreds of years ago. The fact that this is
Yeah,
native tribes, but also set just 30 years ago.
and a true story, and it's like less than 2 hours too. Like it was a pretty quick watch. Yeah, 100 minutes, so just over an hour and a half. Yeah, it was what paced pretty well, super good story, and even the like the performances for two main characters who are basically not necessarily playing themselves, but had never acted before. Like the performances are good.
Yes, yes, that definitely impressed me as well. It looks like the directors have not done a movie since, or don't have anything coming up necessarily. Kind of more just the setting itself, and again, because this is a part of the world that's been relatively unchanged for so long. I did like all the little things, like the guy she was supposed to marry was his name was Captain Cook, like
Yes. When the at the beginning when the grandfather takes a little kid to the volcano, he
yes,
points out,
yes.
he said, "Oh yeah, right there, that's where Captain Cook landed on our island."
Yes, and so they have an appreciation of history, and it wasn't even
Hmm.
like an I rue the day. It's like no, they're
Right.
very accepting. Now there is the conflict
Yes.
with the other tribe, and that was kind of interesting too. That while they're at the volcano, they get attacked by the other tribe because they saw him as the shaman and were blaming him for their crop failures.
Right.
And so they're like, well, we got to take him out so we can have good crops. So kind of from their point of view, it's like, well, yeah, if that's what you believe, then you need to take him out to protect your people.
Right. It's justified.
Right. Now,
I mean, it's
obviously,
it's
the
not,
belief
but
it's right. The belief
from
itself
right.
was had a logic to it. I really did appreciate too. In my notes here, I wrote volcano as spiritual experience, and the idea that they kind of
Yeah.
saw this volcano as this old ancient life giver, and it had the name of like a female god. Don't they even call it like the grandmother or something? Like it's. I kind of got that spiritual vibe while they were hanging out at the volcano.
Hmm.
And they also did a great job of setting everything up too. So like the volcano is kind of set up early on as this, reverent location. Then obviously that they come back to it at the end, and that's actually where they kill themselves. It's basically the same place that the grandpa and the little sister were at the beginning.
Yeah.
Other little cultural things. The line that's like the boys are swimming and the girl runs off with his little cloth that goes in front, and they call it the penis sheath. And so like
Yes.
they're chasing it out. She's like, she stole my penis sheath. Like, it's just how comfortable they are with mostly nudity. So they mostly wear clothing of grass clothing on the lower half. And
Right.
what's interesting too is I don't know how to say this. So like basically how the taboo is sexualized. So if you don't cover things or have shame associated with, say, women's breasts, then they become desexualized. And it's the fact that we take such pains to hide them that makes them sexualized. Is that, and so, that's kind of
Right.
highlighted when
Yeah,
you
I
see
can
a
see
culture
that.
like this. And then you see also references to, say, jokes in the Islamic world where the guys are drooling over a woman's calf or ankle because it's normally hidden. And so even something
Sure.
like that seems transgressive and becomes sexualized. And I don't necessarily have a real point there, but I just think it's an interesting look at human psychology and human sexuality when you kind of see how we act when things become sexualized or are not as inherent as I think we treat them as, and they're actually way more cultural than you would imagine.
Right.
The screenplay also just does a great job. We were kind of talking about it a little bit, but it's a great job of setting everything up. So even like the poison mushrooms make a point of the little sister tries to grab some early when she's with
Yeah.
grandpa, and he's like, "No, don't eat the ones. The
Yeah.
ones on the trees are poisonous." And it's
Which
a good lesson.
I didn't even necessarily catch that as like a Chekhov's gun type deal.
Correct. Absolutely.
I took that as a because it serves two purposes. One, it sets up the mushrooms, but it also shows this dynamic between the grandfather and the little kid. Like this is how this culture passes knowledge down from one generation to the next. As you go out with your grandpa and you just learn about the world because he's gonna, he teaches her about the mushrooms and he, shows her like their spiritual roots at this volcano. And so it kind of all fit in that scene, by itself. But then later on, you see Dane go and picking the poison mushrooms, which again, I didn't process that as, oh, he's going to eat those and kill himself. I thought he was going to like poison somebody or use those as some kind of plan to, sabotage the other tribe, maybe poison their leader, poison the guy who was going to marry Wawa. But, then they use those poison mushrooms on themselves But yeah, I thought that was like really good writing, how they set that up and showed it to you without making it like, oh, look, pay attention to this because this is gonna, be really important later. It was just kind of a thing that happened in passing that fit with the rest of the scene. But when you go back and look at it after watching the entire movie, it was a really good setup.
Right. And of course, the best Chekhov's guns aren't obvious. You don't realize, you're only supposed to realize retroactively what it was. Yeah. And
Yes.
especially if they can serve two purposes, like you were saying. Yeah, they did say too, because they were all non professional actors, they basically picked Dane specifically. They said it's like everyone just recognized he was the best looking guy in the tribe, so we'll make him the
Yeah.
lead.
So they said, yep, this is our guy. He's the main character because he's the best looking dude.
That is interesting though too, because despite what I said about different cultures and different things that are sexualized, attractiveness seems to be more universal. Because the guy, he was a good
Sure.
looking guy,
Yeah, he's a good
and
looking dude.
right, and Wawa's really cute too. So regardless of culture, there we do seem to kind of agree on face physically attractiveness, which is kind of interesting. Uh,
Yeah.
man, what can we talk about to keep this from being the shortest episode ever?
I mean, it's such a, I don't want to say small as in insignificant, but small as in not far reaching. Like this story has, big implications like for this tribe. Obviously, it was like the incident that caused this tribe to allow love marriage, but outside of that, it's not really like a worldwide historical event like the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan or something.
I guess I can real quickly just talk about a little bit of the history of Vanuatu. And there actually isn't a lot of knowledge of the history before the Europeans arrived because they didn't have any written records. And it's also not a place where they've spent a lot of time doing any kind of archaeological work. It does look like the islands were settled just 3,000 years ago. As far as Europeans, they do mention Captain Cook in the film, and he explored the islands in the 1770s, but they actually had Europeans there almost 200 years earlier in the early 1600s when the Portuguese arrived. Missionaries started arriving around 1839, both Catholic and Protestant, and at first the natives were actually hostile towards them, unlike what we saw in the film. And after years of being under control of the French and the British, both at the same time, then the British separately after World War II, Vanuatu did finally become independent in 1980, so not long before the events in the film here. The whole country is just over 300,000 people spread across all these islands. So that's fewer people than are in Sedgwick County in Kansas. 75% of them do still live in kind of their tribal villages, but their 25% is their small cities and their somewhat westernized government and infrastructure and everything. But with all that, it's actually kind of interesting. They do, these pollings around the world, or I forget what the exact body is that does this, but it's been called the happiest place on earth as far as like how happy the people are, the citizens are. And then they also look at the environmental impact, which is of course very low since 75% are living tribally still. So yeah, just an interesting place. And actually, I didn't realize this until doing some extra research just now on YouTube and stuff. It looks like a great place to visit. Again, if it's just kind of this tropical South Pacific thing near Australia, New Zealand, with just the happiest people in the world. I mean, that's kind of awesome. So next week we're headed to Germany, where we deal with the fall of communism in East Berlin with Goodbye Lenin.